Welcome to Mom Alternative, where we provide an alternative perspective to motherhood and parenting. Amongst other things, today we'll cover relying on your husband to fix things around the house, managing a co-parenting relationship when you don't trust the father, and what to do if you hate your husband after having a baby. So our first thread is titled, Do Your Husbands Do This? OP says, if something with the house breaks, do your husbands usually take the lead and fix it, whether it be call a maintenance person or do it themselves? If your clothes dryer broke, would they just go buy one at Home Depot and replace it? If a drain was clogged, would they call a plumber? If your car needs repair, would they find a shop? We both work full time and I do everything for our toddler. My husband maybe plays with him 10 minutes a day. I also do all the cooking and grocery household shopping for our home. I manage all medical and school appointments for my son, do laundry and most of the cleaning. My husband walks the dog, takes garbage out and does yard work. It's a small city lot. Many things have broken in our house and nothing gets resolved. I wish he would just take lead and do it. But he thinks we both need to participate and that we both have to research and pick out a new clothes dryer together, both research and call plumbers, etc. I honestly have hardly any time to eat and sleep each day, being I'm the one up with the toddler at night, let alone research a clothes dryer or take time to call around and schedule a plumber or call auto shops. It's crazy to me that he wouldn't just take lead and resolve those things and we get in horrible fights because they haven't been resolved. He wants them resolved as badly as me, but it's like we both are refusing to take lead and do them. He insists we need to do them together. I just don't have another minute in the day to take on even more. The fights have been going on so long about these kinds of things that our marriage is so far in the dumps. That's a pretty sad situation. What I hear when I read this, if that makes sense, is that they have, I think her expectations towards him are kind of like to be a man, to be honest. And I mean this in the nicest way possible, but my husband would never expect me to be the person to call a plumber or to try and fix things that are broken around the house, which 99.9% of the time he can fix better than me and has a much better idea of how to fix them himself. And I understand that maybe some people will be like, this is a traditional male-female role division thing. Of course, the woman can do it too. And it's like, yes, she could. But there is this kind of expectation and desire from women, I think the majority of women, where they would wish the husband would take on this type of work. And I believe that it's very clear that she has this expectation. Now, she tries to, I feel that her primary need here is kind of covered by all these layers of, but look, I'm doing so much other work around the house. He's barely helping out with the kid. I'm already, really tired and so on and so forth, which is fair enough if she feels that there's an unbalanced way of, or an unbalanced contribution, let's say an unbalanced contribution to the household from both of them. And she feels that she's contributing a lot more than he is. And that's kind of part of the source of frustration. But honestly, on a really fundamental level, I think the source of her frustration is she just wants her husband to take charge of some things in the house. And this is one of those areas that she considers her husband to be primarily responsible for. Now, for him to react in this very passive way, where he doesn't seem to have the confidence to make decisions by himself around things that impact both of them equally. And he does get frustrated with the problems itself. So it's not that he doesn't care or doesn't notice that something is broken and needs fixing, but that he seems to need her approval before he goes ahead and fixes it. He wants to always make these decisions together. Sounds to me like either he just has zero self-confidence in general, and he's the type of man who struggles to make decisions kind of across the board. And that could be down to any number, like he might just be that type of person. But if this is the only case in which that manifests itself, then it probably is down to maybe like previous experience with his wife, in terms of if he makes a decision, she freaks out, then eventually he develops this habit of like, okay, you know what? I'm always going to be safe and secure and I will not get criticism if I can avoid conflict in future if I do it this way for now. Those are the kinds of ways that I'm trying to rationalize why he would make this type of decision. But I do find it a bit strange. I find it also strange that it's something that they have to argue about repeatedly. Because honestly, if I told my husband, yeah, you know what? I don't care what type of clothes dryer you get, just get one, please. then I think he would do it. I think he would take me up on that. Now, if I were OP and I had this type of problem, I would ask first why he feels that both of us need to be involved in making these types of decisions. And I would question for myself if I have done anything from a behavior perspective that gives him the impression that I don't trust him to make those decisions by himself. Because I would argue that in the majority of cases, if he feels that way, then he's never going to be able to build the confidence to just do stuff by himself. So that's what I would ask fundamentally. And that's how I would try to work on myself. And then hopefully one of the nice things that you could do would be to agree on smaller things that he could start just taking the lead on, and then say, hey, go ahead and do it, and then try to reinforce that. So even, if let's say he buys some kind of smaller appliance that you don't care so much about, and then even if you don't like it, I would still probably try to give some positive reinforcement along the lines of, hey, it was really great that you did that. I really appreciate that you took the time to do it. That would be one way that you could start working on building up his confidence over time. But yeah, it kind of sucks. Honestly, it's one of those things where I would say this is a really good example of the type of man that most women just don't want, because it's frustrating and it is exhausting to be in charge of making all decisions around the house for a lot of women. And especially these types of decisions are just, I want to say, are better when they're handled by a man. And you can see some of the comments here. One person says, the time used to fight about it could be used to fix the home repairs, which I really think is a totally unhelpful response, by the way. I think that the time used to fight about it could be used to just do the thing. But if you have a mismatch in values, right, and she expects him to do X and he is doing Y instead, then you do kind of need to solve that as a conflict point. Anyway, but yes, to continue reading, this person says, my husband and I divide and conquer when things go wrong. For example, he could sort a plumber, you could order a dryer for home delivery, and you could both take the car to get repaired and have a coffee together while it's being fixed. It sounds like the issue goes deeper than just who sorts out home repairs, though. It looks like you're taking on a lot more of the responsibility of the household than he is. 10 minutes a day to play with his toddler just seems so little. If you're doing household chores, I would expect him to be on kid duty and vice versa. That kind of makes sense to me. I don't even know that I consider that to be the primary problem here. I kind of feel like she mentioned all of these things because she wants to justify her expectations towards him. That's how I read it. So it's not that she's even annoyed that she's doing so much with the toddler or anything, or she's like, hey, I really want him to help out more. That may well be the case. But she's annoyed that he's not even doing the home repairs as well. And that's the source of frustration. If that is the case and she's actually annoyed at both, then fair enough, you can talk about it. Next comment, which is actually hysterical. She says, I definitely take the lead for fixing things. My dad built our house, so if anything needs fixing, I call my dad. Otherwise, I do agree that major fixes purchases are a group effort. Now, the really hilarious thing about this statement is she says, I take the lead for fixing things by calling my dad and asking him to fix them, which is, I mean, okay, it's not really taking the lead for fixing things, but fair enough. It's still kind of asking a man to do it, but okay, if that's how you justify it for myself. Now you can see a lot of other people who somehow don't notice the irony of what they're saying here, where they say, same, I love my husband, but when it comes to that stuff, I instantly get my dad. And the next person says, yeah, my dad's a plumber, general contractor, and inspector. He's my go-to. My husband is better with technology. Like, fair enough. Obviously, if your dad is an expert in what he's doing, but it's hilarious to have wives say, yeah, of course, I take the lead. Just my dad does it. The next comment here says, you're upset because your husband doesn't schedule a plumber, but not that he doesn't parent his child. Yikes. No, my husband isn't great about things like that. He does them eventually if I'm tied up, but he takes a little longer than I would like. He's not a terrible parent or partner, though. I'd have divorced him if he was like yours. People are always really quick to throw around terms like divorce. I would always say that if you don't know the shape of the entire relationship and you don't understand the history and you don't understand the context, maybe she's happy 99% of the time, but it's just when there's home repairs that they're really upset and they get really angry at each other. Then, to say things like, I would have just divorced him is a little bit harsh. I agree that she doesn't present the husband in the best possible light when she says things like, he only spends 10 minutes a day with their kid. But I would question if that's really the case, to be honest. I think that people are very likely to exaggerate just to present their side of the story in a more favorable light. But maybe I'm being pretty unfair here. Now, I really like this comment. This person says, my husband 100% does everything himself. He fixes 100% of anything that breaks or is breaking, regardless if it's the house or cars, toy, etc. 90% of the time, he does it the same day or the week it breaks. If a product needs to be replaced, I typically ask him what features he wants. He tells me, then I find a replacement with what he wants and what I want, and we usually either do a little trip together to go pick it up, or we just do a quick order online. I'm a stay-at-home mum, he works full-time. But he's also not a crap partner like you've described yours. My husband is obsessed with the kids, always cleans every day, does the laundry, helps with grocery shopping, and so on. I'd also sleep train your toddler, no reason for them to be waking in the middle of the night. With all this being said, if something isn't fixed in 7 to 10 days, I go ahead and take the lead to make the calls and find the replacements, because I love my husband and I don't want him to feel overwhelmed. I would have never let it go so far to the point that tons of things are broken everywhere. It's my house too. You have a spouse problem. He isn't a good one, and he isn't a good dad either. Now, I think this is a little bit harsh in some ways, but maybe I'm just reading this wrong in terms of the things that really stand out to me about this thread are different from other people. What I do appreciate is this understanding of, okay, you know what, usually he does it, but if I thought that he was struggling or unable to do it or just busy with other things for any reason, then of course I'll jump in and help out, because I'm an equal partner in our relationship, in our marriage, in our house. And it's as much my responsibility to ensure that things get fixed as it is his. I think that's in general a good attitude and a good mindset to have when it comes to marriage and managing everything around your household. And I would expect the same from both sides of the marriage here. So not only should it be the wife jumping in and helping out if she seems to need to, but also that the husband should jump in and help out with childcare or with laundry or with whatever when it's necessary as well. So yeah, this is a really interesting case just for the fact that the husband really seems to have ended up in this position where he's scared of making decisions on pretty simple things as well. Like it would not be the end of the world if you bought one washing machine versus another one, even if it's a relatively large expense. Like it's washing machines are similar enough. So long as they wash clothes, you're likely to be quite fine. And I think that that's a bit of a shame. And if I were his wife and I really liked my husband and, you know, everything else in the relationship was going on pretty fine, then I would probably try and sit down and talk this out in particular. And I would really explicitly say, look, I really don't care what clothes dryer you buy. Just buy one that you think is going to be good and decent. And that would be it. Our next one is titled, My son was given a medicine that I wasn't told about by his father. I'm a first-time mum and I'm so lost. My son, who's 6 months old, has been staying with his father while he's in town. I'm the primary caretaker. It's his first week with him alone, but he will be with his mum and sister, who is also a mum. Our son has been teething lately, but his doctor has said that Tylenol is the safest thing he can take for the pain. I repeatedly told him to make sure that he has Tylenol only. I was just called on FaceTime, but saying he's feeling much better because he gave him a different medicine, and my heart sunk and I felt sick to my stomach. I freaked out and he took it the wrong way and was saying that he got it because his mom and sister told him, and they know more than me. I am spiraling because even his mom and sister are saying I'm insane for freaking out. I just don't know anymore. They're making me feel bad for freaking out because he's fine and feels better only because of this medicine, but they just completely disrespected what I had said. He was saying his mom and sister know more than me. It hurts so much because he's never been to a doctor's appointment, so how could he possibly know? I think about what would have happened if it did affect our son negatively. Now, I would argue that the fundamental, if you take this situation at face value, you would say, okay, the kid is sick and he's hanging out with his dad. His dad has other people around who've also parented children, so they have some kind of experience with how to deal with kids when they're sick, presumably. And his dad makes a parental decision to give him some kind of medicine to help him with his sickness. Now, if this happened in the context of my marriage, I would 100% trust that my husband has a very good idea of what types of medicines I'm okay with and which ones I'm not, and he would not choose a medicine that he thought would be somehow harmful to our child. And I would also trust that he would do his due diligence in terms of making sure that whatever he's giving our son is going to be good for him. These are kind of fundamental things that you have to trust when someone else is the parent of your child as well, right? It cannot be that I'm the sole person capable of making decisions for our son's health, because technically we're both parents and his dad has equal right to make decisions for his health as I do. I think that's a pretty fundamental thing. The fact of the matter in this case is that they are broken up. They're not actually together. He's not her husband. And presumably, you know, whatever caused that, or for whatever reason that happened, I would argue that this is a source of conflict because she does not trust his father to look after him. And that's a pretty major problem. I don't know how you would manage to co-parent with someone else if you had zero trust in his father. Now, she says she freaks out. She says that his primary reason for it was like, yeah, my mom said it was okay, and so it's fine. And this is the argument that he gave in terms of his mom and his sister know better than his mother is not a good argument, and that I assume it will always land in the wrong way. It will always be taken the wrong way because what you're saying is that you don't trust a mother to make good decisions. But maybe, just maybe, that is the fundamental problem here. The problem is that neither party trusts the other one to make decent decisions for the kid. And then, of course, you freak out about relatively minor things. Now, obviously, it depends on what types of medicine was given. And yes, okay, I guess the dad could have poisoned their child. I don't think that that's very likely. I think the majority of parents do look up what types of things they're giving their kids before they just give them stuff. But if that's how you're dealing with it, I say this honestly as someone who's pretty anti-medicine, generally speaking, who would much rather allow my child and his immune system to try and fight off whatever sickness it is quite naturally. I'm very, very cautious about what types of chemicals he is in contact with and so on. And I really say this as someone, even with all of those caveats, this is just not a normal response for someone whose dad makes a decision, because I would always treat it as like, okay, well, he's also the dad, right? So I can't dictate 100% of everything that his dad does with him. That's what I find a little bit strange about this one. I think her freak out is a little bit over the top. I think that how he defended himself in terms of saying, yeah, but my mom said it was okay. That's not a good defense. I would have much rather gone with the defense of, hey, look, I looked into the medicine that I was giving him. I made sure, I checked with a couple of other people to make sure that it was okay. I also read the leaflet inside to make sure that it's okay. And as far as there's no problems. Yes, I understand that the doctor said he can only have Tylenol, but I think what I gave him was perfectly reasonable and perfectly fine. And I'm capable of making these decisions for my kid. Thank you. That's how I would have responded if I were him. And then I think it sounds a little bit less disrespectful and a little bit less dismissive than if you say, yeah, I don't care what you said, but my mom said X. That's not a good response. So OP, if I were you, I would probably try and fundamentally work on this issue of trust within this co-parenting relationship that you have going on, and try to just understand why it is you feel that you cannot trust him to make good decisions for your son's health, and why he seems like he doesn't trust you when you say whatever it is you say, why he doesn't take that quite so seriously. And then that's the foundation that I would try to work on before you freak out about things like medicines, etc. This is me. I'm pretty much the only person that says this. Everyone else is like, hey, that's rude and obnoxious. You know your baby best. There is this attitude that people seem to have, and yes, of course, okay, she's the primary caretaker, so she does know the baby best, but he still is dad, he's still the dad. You cannot get rid of that. You can't just erase him from the equation, especially not when you're trying to co-parent, right? You have to just accept that on some level, he's allowed to make decisions too. Next person says, how much could his mom know if she didn't teach him the common courtesy of respecting the mother of his child? Sorry, this just irks me to no end when people don't follow the primary caregiver's instructions. I'm so sorry you went through that. You have every right to be upset. I think that there is this attitude where it's the expectation is that people can't think for themselves. And so if you give them rules and guidelines, then they just have to follow them like mindless morons without having a brain and going, okay, does this actually make sense for the particular circumstance and the particular situation in which we find ourselves? And if it doesn't make sense for that situation, then I would always be much happier for the parent to decide, hey, you know what, just doesn't make sense in this particular context. I need to do something else. And they can think by themselves and make that decision is so much better than just me saying, hey, okay, this is my rule. Everyone should follow it. I don't care what reasons you have or what comes up. It's just the rules stand. That's not a good attitude, and that's not a good mindset to get into when you're trying to parent. This one's really funny. It's just, one person asks her what was given. She posts a picture of it that I've blocked because I don't want the medicine and I didn't want to talk about that. But she says, hey, one person replies to that picture and says, that's a great medicine. It's completely homeopathic. You don't have to worry. If it helped him, it's a lot better than Tylenol. And that's kind of the irony of this whole thread. For all that she freaked out and for all that she was like, hey, I know best, in the end, it seems like the dad may have made a better decision for the kid and his health than what she told him to do. Another person also replies, that's perfectly safe. I understand that you're freaking out. I would be too. I can't imagine my baby going to stay with someone else for a week and not being in control. However, this is just the deal when you're co-parenting with someone you aren't with. It is his child as much as it is yours. And while your baby is with the dad, there are going to be a lot of decisions you don't have control over that perhaps you wouldn't make. As long as your baby is safe, I recommend some good therapy for learning how to cope with the extremely difficult emotional roller coaster that co-parenting will be. And that's a great piece of advice because they really comes out just how extreme this reaction is and how it's very clear that it's from the context of co-parenting that there's a problem here, that it's this loss of control over the child and the decisions that impact the child that is freaking her out. That's the source of the freak out, so much more than the actual medicine that he was given and whether that medicine was dangerous or not. And that's what really fundamentally makes it irrational. That's why it's an emotional, irrational response that is not helpful for the kids, not helpful for the dad, and it's not helpful for the relationships that she has and the way that she's interacting with the people around her. Another person replies to this and says, hey, I get it. They're being disrespectful of your wishes. They aren't respecting your boundaries and authority as primary caregiver. With that said, that isn't medicine. It's a homeopathic medicine, in quotes. It is herbs, etc., not medicine that could cause issues. Also, just FYI, but if baby is over 6 months, infant ibuprofen is proven to be more effective as well as longer lasting. I would try approaching the conversation again, set boundaries. If you had asked me first, you would have included me in the decision and respected me as a child's mother, since I already stated specifically what the baby could have. And I still think that this is really over the top. If I had a co-parenting relationship with the father of my child, then I would still hope that he can make unilateral decisions when it's necessary without having to call me up every minute and be like, hey, I want to give him this. What do you think? I want to do that. What do you think? I think eventually I'd be like, okay, look, you're a grown adult man. You should be able to make decisions by yourself. I shouldn't have to approve everything. Yeah, and I find it also a little bit funny when there are people here who try to give some amount of advice in terms of, hey, you should give this other type of medicine instead. Like, maybe you should be a little bit cautious before you say things like that. Next person says, hey, I totally understand why you're upset. I'm sure it's hard to co-parent. However, he is a parent just like you. He has a right to give the baby medicine. He should tell you what the baby is given, just like you should do the same. Being mean and getting mad about everything is going to make co-parenting even more stressful for you, and especially for your child. And so I'm not the only person who picked up on the co-parenting problem. As you can see, it's definitely one of the sad realities of life, in my opinion, in terms of, hey, when relationships break down and then kids are always caught in this battle between mother and father and trying to find a way to navigate that relationship and still make it a really healthy, happy place for your child is already very difficult. And then add to that a set of irrational emotional reactions, an intense amount of fear and anxiety about your child and their health, and a desire for control that's way beyond what is reasonable and normal to have in this situation. And suddenly everything falls apart a lot more. So if you are in this type of situation, I would really, really try and work on trust and try to make sure that, hey, you actually trust the father to make good decisions. If you have reason to believe that he cannot make good decisions, then freaking out is fair enough. But otherwise, if he's proven himself to be a normal person who can make reasonable decisions by himself, then there's no reason to be like, I cannot believe that he did this, and to take that so personally. Our next one is titled, I hate my husband after having baby. I'm 4 months postpartum and every day is still very hard. I go to bed every night anxious and crying because I know the night shift and next day will continue to be hard. It's out of character for me to be so angry all the time. I'm just angry at my spouse every day. I feel like I do 99.99% of baby duties. I'm starving most days. I can't shower or poo when I want to or need to. He doesn't even know what that's like. He comes home from work and goes straight into the shower. It makes me angry. It sucks to say, but I feel like I picked the wrong person to start a family with. He doesn't take initiative to be a hands-on dad, and the times he has, he gives up easily and passes the baby right back to me. I ask for help and he acts like I'm needy for wanting help because, quote, my only job is taking care of our baby. Yes, his exact words. When I express how overwhelmed I am, he mentions that his mom and my mom had kids with no one's help, so if they can do it, so can I. In the same breath, he says, if you need my help, then ask. So when I do ask, he makes it obvious that he's not enthusiastic about doing things with the baby like feeding or changing his diaper and soothing him. He's always in a bad mood after work and makes himself unapproachable to be asked to do anything. Like I said, if I do ask, he's unhappy about it, and then I end up being punished by being given a bad attitude and the silent treatment. I think I actually hate him. My mood instantly changes when he's around and I get angry. He's impossible to communicate with, and honestly, I don't know how long we can last like this. I wish I knew what true partnership in parenting felt like. Whew, that's a pretty depressing thread on the whole. There are two angles to this particular story. One is the husband does not seem to be as involved or as helpful as he should be with the newborn. And the other one is it does seem like her level of anger is a little bit abnormal and probably hormonal in some kind of way. So when she says it's out of character for me to be so angry all the time, that sounds to me, so I'm one of those people, right, who gets very depressed after some kind of sleep deprivation. And if I have sleep deprivation for, let's say, a week, and then by week 2, I'm going to be going a little bit nuts and going a little bit insane. Your emotional regulation just goes completely out the window when you're very, very, very tired. It sounds to me like that is a big part of what this mother is struggling with. And she says, I go to bed every night anxious and crying because I know that the night shift will be hard and the next day will continue to be hard. And it sounds to me like she's ended up in this spiral where she's kind of like just a hamster running in a wheel and she doesn't have a way out. And the husband here is either not noticing that or not really able to help her. And that's kind of where the problem is coming from. So there's always two aspects to every story here. I would probably, if I were OP, I would really work very hard on the sleep aspect first, because with a little bit more sleep, even if it's just an hour or 2 hours, you're probably going to feel a lot better. And so if that means that you take a couple of nights where you tell your husband, hey, look, dear husband, I really need some sleep. I'm really struggling. I cannot keep functioning like this. Then that will make a big difference. And honestly, in my marriage, whenever I got to this point with childcare, my husband was always able to step up again, even if it's just one night or if it's a couple of nights in a row. And it just makes such a huge difference because it gives you a very different perspective on life. So that's the first thing that I would absolutely try to change. The other thing is I think it's important to try to separate anger towards your situation, this lack of like the emotional dysregulation that's caused by sleep deprivation, to try to separate that from things like when she says, when I express how overwhelmed I am, he mentions that his mom and my mom had kids with no one's help. So if they can do it, so can I. Now that obviously sounds like a very dismissive, harsh thing to say to someone who's really struggling. That's obviously not helpful. So whatever happened in the course of that conversation that ended up being said, I would probably try to just dismiss those kinds of things and just ignore them and not pay too much attention to them, because they're not conducive to you actually being able to solve the problem that you're experiencing. Fundamentally, what is clear is that he says, if you need my help, then ask. And if that is the case, then I assume that he's helping. She says, when I do ask, he makes it obvious that he's not enthusiastic. Now, that's a very different idea. Like, I don't know how you express enthusiasm about changing a diaper, to be honest. It's just a thing that you do, right? I get that he might be moody. Maybe he's really tired and really stressed out at work. Maybe he's also struggling to cope with the change that you're both experiencing in terms of having a child. And 4 months old is still pretty fresh after having a baby. So things are still very, very new, and you haven't really settled into different roles or expectations or understood really how your life is changing because you have a kid. So I think that this basically mixing up everything into one giant ball of mess is not helpful in terms of trying to solve the problem. If he actually is helpful when you ask him to be helpful, then just grab the bull by the horns and ask him to help you more often. And specifically with regards to sleep and showering and pooping when you need to, those are pretty fundamental things that you need to figure out. Like, you need to sort out ways that you can do these things, especially actually during the day when you're looking after your baby and you still need to shower. You need to find a place where you can keep your baby somewhere safe. And maybe for some people, like, they still want a camera on so they can still watch them. But honestly, leaving a baby for 5 minutes, you can even leave a baby on the floor in your bathroom for 5 minutes or just on their back where it's pretty safe, and give them a toy to occupy themselves and just go shower. It's not a big deal. You can do this. Now, obviously, you should lay them on something, right? Don't lay them straight on the cold floor. That's not comfortable. So just looking for ways throughout the day where you stop feeling like you are a slave to your baby and their needs. You don't need to feel that way. You can make space for yourself to do whatever you need to do. And then on the other hand, you don't need to think that your husband needs to be like super excited and hyper about everything in order to help you out. If he's willing to help you out and he's open to helping you out, then just take the help and accept it. And it doesn't matter if he's moody about it. She says, if I do ask, he's unhappy about it, and then I end up being punished by being given a bad attitude and the silent treatment. It sounds to me like there's a bunch more that's going on here behind the scenes than what OP has said. I don't think that someone would give her the silent, maybe. I know that there are a lot of husbands out there who are very unreasonable, but I doubt that this attitude, this response of giving her a bad attitude and the silent treatment is caused by her saying, hey, can you change his diaper, please? I suspect that they're both struggling here and that both of them need to take a step back, and she definitely needs to get some sleep, and then they'll both feel a lot better. And when she says, I think I actually hate him, I think this is super sad. I assume, honestly, it may well be the case that their marriage is just falling apart and there's no way to save it. But I think that in the majority of cases, if you take a little bit of distance and you make decisions with a good night's sleep behind you, you will generally make a very different decision to what you'd make when you're in the thick of it and you're really stressed out. Now you can see some of the comments. One person says, hey, this is actually OP. She's describing what the baby is like. And you can see a lot of her stress really comes from how the baby interacts and how the baby feels. So she says, hey, my baby screams at the top of his lungs. It's kind of crazy. Do all babies cry like that? Whenever I hear other babies at the doctor's office, I don't feel like they're screaming like him. He acts as if he's in pain or disturbed. And then as soon as I go back and just give him attention, he's smiling and totally fine again. So it sounds to me like the baby's actually struggling with something. I don't know what that something is, but I wouldn't assume that if a baby is screaming at the top of their lungs like that, that everything is completely fine. I would guess that when she gives him attention, he calms down because he gets distracted from whatever's going on. Now, some people here will say that, hey, he probably has problems like reflux or gas or some kind of digestion thing like this. There's something going on there that is causing him to be such an unhappy baby and so hard to deal with. Some other comments that I think are a little bit more helpful. This person says, for some reason, men are just different than us. They need to be told what to do sometimes. And I know it is hard with a new baby. I'm giving you this advice from a person that was always feeling anger towards my husband after having my second baby. I think it's just a stress that we go through and we want them to feel the same as we feel, but they just respond differently from us mums and don't do what we want them to do with the baby. I also have very little patience. Just talk to him in a relaxed way. I know it's hard, and I was so angry at my husband. I felt like I hated him and he got tired of it, and now we're this close to divorce. Believe me, they get tired too. Just when you feel super angry, take a walk, talk to someone. Also, speak to him about how you're feeling and why and how it will help if he just helps you without you having to ask. I wish the best for you guys. And so she seems to make the point fundamentally that there's a difference between how babies interact with, how husbands interact with babies versus mothers. And I think that that's probably true. In general, I think if you just assume that the other person knows everything that you're thinking and wanting and desiring without you ever articulating that, then that's not good. But then it really still, like, it matters a lot how you articulate it. And if you're articulating it from this place of sleep deprivation, rage, frustration, then that always comes across as naggy, and that's really tiring to deal with. So at some point you need to find a way for both of you to take a step back so that you're able to have a conversation that is not so emotionally charged, that you're able to really connect with each other and to really understand where the problems are and how to fix them. This person says, at 4 months postpartum, everything for me was chaos. Same issues of not having time to eat, shower, use the toilet. The difference is that I was separated from the father, so I expected to do everything. Your partner should be willing to help raise your child. Maybe plan a day out and leave him to look after the baby. That way he might understand what it involves. Some people seem to think looking after a baby is easier than going to work. Personally, I love going to work to have a break from my son occasionally. After a 13-hour shift, I still come home and care for my baby because I'm a parent. Your partner needs to realize that he's a parent now, so it doesn't matter if he comes home from work tired or in a bad mood, his child still needs his attention. And that's kind of my point in terms of there is a big change that people go through when they have a baby, and sometimes it just takes some time to be able to work past that change. So this is a pretty sad circumstance. I really hope for OP that she manages to get some sleep and to try and sort out exactly what the source of her anger is. And if it is, I mean, some people in the comments do talk about things like postpartum rage, which is a symptom of one of the postpartum symptoms that some people go through. So it's not just depression and anxiety, but some people really experience rage as an emotion. If that is the source of her struggles, then that is something that I would really try to get help with. And in general, just try to get a little bit more of a support system around you, that you're not feeling so overwhelmed all the time, because that is not conducive to a happy marriage either. And an unhappy husband will also not be that great to be around when you're at home. Our next one is on a much lighter note, titled Struggling to Take My Prenatals. Anyone else out there that doesn't eat meat or fish and is grossed out when it comes to taking their prenatals? I'm 9 weeks, 4 days, and have been taking them since we were trying, and I've been downing them with OJ, orange juice, but I literally cannot any longer. They are disgusting. Right now I take the Nature Made gummies and their strawberry flavor. Any ideas to help? Are they super, super necessary? In the mornings, in the morning's bite, I guess she bit through one, there was something hard inside one of my gummies and I am completely put off by them. So help. Now, I am going to be a pretty terrible person here, but honestly, if you put yourself in the circumstances where you make a dietary choice that is, like, the choice itself restricts the amount of nutrients that you can possibly get in your body, and then, hey, now you have to take these pills to supplement because your diet is not actually good enough to support your system, then you're kind of asking for it. You've made all the decisions that you need that put you in this position. Now, in general, when it comes to prenatals, I'm actually not a huge fan. I would argue that for the vast majority of people, and even today, now prenatals have become very common in the West, but they are not a thing in the vast majority of the world. The vast majority of women, when they're pregnant, don't have access to something like prenatals and don't take them. And so there is a real question here, because they're recommended to everyone who gets pregnant. When I got pregnant, my doctor literally just gave me packages of prenatals and said, hey, take these every day. There is a reason, at the very least. I would always be skeptical of any advice that is given to 100% of the population, of any population, no matter what. Why? Because there are always individual circumstances that should be taken into consideration. And if, for example, my diet is a problem, then yeah, fair enough, maybe I do need a prenatal. Or if I'm suffering from some kind of illness, or if my body needs extra support for some reason, my doctor should know this and make a decision for me based on my medical history. It should not just be, yeah, okay, 100% of people need prenatals, even though prenatals are a pretty recent thing. It's not that 100% of pregnant women still need, 100% of pregnant women need prenatals to be able to have a good pregnancy and a healthy baby. So on a fundamental level, I'm a little bit skeptical of prenatals, and I would only choose to take them if I felt that they were necessary for me. Now, if I were making the choice not to eat meat or fish, which is includes a pretty big chunk of nutrients that I'm not going to be able to get hold of, then maybe I would consider it. And under those circumstances, I wouldn't be going, is it really, really necessary? What can I do to get rid of this? And you'll see the first comment here says, hey, unless you have a notable deficiency, I don't think prenatals are necessary. Again, this is a statement that I would make if I knew what someone's diet looks like and if I knew what their blood work looks like, I wouldn't just be like, oh, okay, just in general, you don't need them. But yeah. Maybe don't put yourself under these circumstances and then complain about it. This person says, I do eat meat and fish, but I also hate my prenatals and sometimes go days without taking them. I feel so guilty, but any I've tried so far taste horrible. And I'm one of those people that since I know I have to take it, I get grossed out by it. I guess since I know that I have to take it, I get grossed out by it. And so what is a little bit hilarious about this is just the sheer number of women who experience already quite a lot of anxiety in their first trimesters, and then they force themselves to take pills that they don't like, that taste disgusting, that smell gross, and then they go, hey, you know what, but I'm told by my doctor that I need to do this. I find it a little bit funny that no one seems to be at all considering their individual circumstances and whether it's necessary for them. This one is another example of that. She says, I was taking these particular ones and it always made me sick and gave me heartburn to the point that I started missing days of taking them. Now, honestly, if your reaction is to actually get sick and get heartburn, then that's a very clear sign from your body saying, hey, this is not good. Whatever it is you just gave me, I don't like it. I don't want it. Please get it out of me. But you know what? Maybe I have just a little bit too much faith in our bodies in terms of being able to figure out what they need. I would encourage anyone who has some doubts about prenatals to really look into the prenatals that they're taking, to talk to their doctor about them, and to maybe consider if they're actually necessary for your individual circumstance. But in general, if you can make dietary choices that really support your body and that give you all the nutrients you need, that will always, in 100% of circumstances, be the better option. So maybe don't choose to not eat meat or fish and then cry about how disgusting your prenatals are. Now, this one is titled Crying During Every Conversation. That is the mother-in-law, by the way. Quick backstory. Husband and I have been together for over 10 years. During that time, I never had phone calls with my mother-in-law, and we saw each other a couple of times a year. Husband always talked to his parents every week or two, but also rarely saw them in person. Then we got pregnant and mother-in-law started calling me multiple times a week, constantly pestering me for updates on baby, driving me crazy, trying to insert herself into every bit of planning, from nursery design to baby gear shopping and decision making. She was always telling me how anxious she was and worried about baby and just couldn't wait for him to get here. I finally exploded one day and told her that I was too anxious myself to deal with her anxiety and basically would tell her what she needs to know about my pregnancy, which is little to nothing. But that I didn't have the capacity for much more. It was a blissful few months of basically no calls. This brings us to the present, just a few more weeks till the due date, and mother-in-law has amped up her call frequency with both my husband and I. Every time she calls either of us, she ends up in tears, literally babbling, crying about how excited she is. She can't handle having to wait any longer, doesn't know what to do with herself, cannot stand the thought of us having her wait to meet him after he arrives. We set a boundary of at least a week postpartum for just us to heal, bond, acclimate, establish breastfeeding. And I'm not even referencing her talking through tears. It's like a straight sobbing, gasping for breath, unable to form complete sentences. I understand she's excited for her first grandchild, but I am at a loss at how to handle her emotions. It's overwhelming, unnecessary, and quite frankly unfair that she's prioritizing her insane excitement and not even asking us how we are. She's so hyper-focused on herself, we can hardly get a word in because she just calls us expecting to let her carry on ranting and for us to just be a listening ear and shoulder to cry on. Husband has done so well respecting boundaries for us, but now that his mom is so emotional, it's like she's manipulating him into feeling bad for her. I am frustrated and so over it. This is a really interesting case. I think that, honestly, I would have no patience for this mother-in-law either, to be completely honest. I want to think a little bit like, I always try to think a little bit from the other side of the situation. So maybe from her angle, it's something like she's just super excited, but honestly, it just sounds like she does not know how to regulate her emotions to a normal human level. And that's a little bit strange as a response to a grandchild. In general, having a grandchild is a little like, I kind of understand a little bit this idea of having a grandchild is a little bit like having a child, and it allows you to relive the emotions that you went through when you were a parent, because now you have a kid again and you can spend time with them and you can bond with them, and all of these feelings are really intense for a lot of people. And, you know, as an example, when we announced our pregnancy to my in-laws, my father-in-law actually teared up, and it was the first time that I've ever seen him get that emotional about anything. But there is a kind of a time and a place for it. It's kind of strange to me that the mother-in-law was super, super, super anxious about the pregnancy to begin with, and then really injected that a lot into the daughter-in-law. That is in and of itself not a healthy relationship. Like, it's already hard enough controlling your anxiety as a pregnant woman. Having someone else shove even more anxiety on top of that is not helpful, and shows that she was very much concerned with herself, which OP also says. And then the response now of, okay, now we're the baby's almost here, and she's really intense. Honestly, I would just sit down and really talk to her about it, and say, I would interrupt her and say, look, I know that you're really excited about the baby. I'm really happy and excited for the baby too. And I really hope that you can have a really good relationship with him and spend lots of time with him. But the emotions that you are exhibiting here are very intense and very hard for us to handle and very hard for us to manage. And if you could tone it down just a little bit, that would be really helpful. I don't know to what extent they've properly sat down and talked about it, because it sounds more like they've just been bowled over by this wave of emotion that comes from the mother-in-law, and they kind of just sit there and like experience it. And that's obviously not good either. So yes, that's how I would deal with it. Honestly, if the husband is feeling bad for her, then I would probably tell him, look, I understand. And I would also, like, I'm happy to help her, and I'm happy for her to be a part of his life, but that there should be limits and there should be restrictions, and it's not our responsibility to help her regulate her emotions. She's a grown adult woman. She should be able to do that all by herself. I see a lot of people like, hey, you need to set boundaries with her. See her once a month. If she doesn't bother to see you before the baby, she shouldn't expect to see much of you now that there is a baby. I always think that this is a really cruel thing that people say. It makes a lot of sense to me why, when you're an adult child, you don't need to spend a ton of time around your parents, and you don't need to see them that often. You don't need to engage with them that often. But it also makes sense to me that they would want to be a little bit more involved in in their grandchildren's life, that they want their grandchildren to also think that they, to just develop a relationship with them, to remember them, to know that they exist, and to spend time with them. It makes a lot more sense to me that you would want to invest more time in a relationship with a child when they're still very young, versus when they are grown adult people who have their own lives, who have their own concerns, who are very independent and self-sufficient, and don't need so much help or support. So I always find it a little bit sad that people immediately jump to, yeah, okay, now you need to separate them, and she doesn't need to expect a relationship with her kid, with her grandkid even. The next comment says, first, block her from your phone. Your husband can deal with this crazy. Second, have him tell her that if she can't control herself, or will be much longer than a week, it will be much longer than a week before she meets the baby. I can't imagine what she'll be like the first time she meets the baby if she's acting like this already. You do not need this mess while you're trying to bond with your baby. I guarantee she'll try to take over all aspects of your baby and will cry when she doesn't get her way. Your husband needs to shut this down. This craziness is the last thing he should be concerned about right now. And yes, the husband does need to shut this down, but I always find it strange that people will equate this type of behavior and this type of excitement with immediately inserting yourself into all circumstances. I don't think that has to be the case. Yeah, you don't need this mess. Yeah, she doesn't need to be completely in your face, but maybe I guess it's possible that she'll see the baby, she'll calm down, she'll understand that the baby's just going to be asleep, and then that there's going to be a long, long life ahead, hopefully, for the baby, and lots of time available for her to bond with the baby, and then maybe she can take it a step back. I think blocking her and so on is a little bit extreme, but I would definitely try to cut down on the phone calls a little bit. It's completely fine to be like, hey, you know what? We don't need to talk this often. There's not much that's changing about the baby and our readiness and so on quite this often. It's easier to distance yourself if you're explicit about what you want and what you need. And if you just explain it a little bit to her and take a step back, and then you don't need to freak out so much. And then the next person says, just based on how irrational she's acting, I would make her wait longer than 1 week for your sakes. Yikes, mute her calls and texts if you can. Pretty much everyone says just cut down, and I don't even disagree with the part of cutting down, but I think you can talk to her and then you can set boundaries, and both of those are completely fine. Like, you don't need to completely freak out and say, hey, okay, she does not need to be a part of our life at all. You can just be a little bit calm about it. That said, if you're a grown adult woman and you still can't regulate your emotions when you're interacting with people, that's a problem, and you should probably work on that. And I would be weirded out if this is the only situation in which she's a little bit strange, because that doesn't make any sense to me. But what do I know about having grandkids, right? Now, the final thread of the day is titled, Did You Lose Yourself During Motherhood? Hi all, I'm a first-time mum. My baby is 4 months and I'm so in love with him. I just wanted some encouragement or advice. I've been feeling insecure, comparing myself to social media models. After having my baby, my body changed a lot. I look at old pictures of me and feel sad, not only physically, but mentally. It's been a roller coaster. I miss the old me. She was strong, independent, secure, confident, and never sought validation. Now I feel the opposite. I get upset when my partner doesn't compliment me. I don't know myself sometimes. Now it's all about the baby and making sure that my partner's needs are being met. I miss reading, I miss journaling, and as much as I try to make time for it, sometimes it's just so hard with a baby. Does it get better? How was your experience? There are two aspects to this one. The first one is that obviously it's very natural and normal that there's a huge change that people go through when they first have a baby, and making both realizing that change, being intentional about what's changing and adjusting to it, adapting to it is not very easy and takes some time, and that's pretty normal. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect that I kind of hate a lot is the type of language that people associate with these kinds of things. So it's this idea, I want to get my body back. Do you lose yourself during motherhood? As if you can no longer be the same person just because you're experiencing some kind of transformation. Now, transformation is a part of life, right? So if you start a new job, sometimes there's an amount of transformation that's associated with that. Obviously, becoming a parent is a huge transformation that you go through. I don't think you ever lose yourself in the transformations that you experience. Instead, you become someone new. You incorporate all of your old self, and now you're experiencing all of these new things, and now you're transforming, so you become something else. You become a new person. And that's a great thing, fundamentally. I think for the vast majority of people, motherhood has the potential to transform you into a much better and a much happier and a much more fulfilled person if you let it, if you treat it in that way, if you don't have this narrative and the story in your head that the previous you was always a better person, because the previous you was strong, independent, secure, confident, and now you aren't any of these things. Now, you might not be any of these things just because you're experiencing a huge change and you haven't yet gotten into a groove, right? You don't know what you're doing. You're not confident about what you're doing. Everything is new and everything is a lot harder to manage than it was before. And then there will hit a point in your journey as a mother where you will develop that confidence and that understanding and that security, because suddenly you know what you're doing. You feel like you know what you're doing. Your baby is at a point where you can see them grow and you can see them develop, and you can see how you are part of that journey with them, and you can nurture them and help them out and just be there with them without feeling like you're a different person. I think that this narrative that people put on themselves and the lens that they look at their life through is the thing that makes it feel distressing, is the thing that makes it feel like a loss, like there's something that you need to grieve in order to move forward. And I think that's a little bit of a shame. That's one aspect to it. To go back to the original aspect, yes, of course, there's a huge change. And yes, the time that you used to spend doing XYZ, now you might not be able to spend doing those things anymore. But honestly, I don't think that motherhood needs to take up quite so much of your time and energy. Things like reading and journaling, these are things that you can do for half an hour at a time. You should be able to do them during a nap. I feel that a lot of people feel so powerless to the circumstance. And I say this as someone who actually struggles with this myself, in terms of being like, I really want to get this done, and then I don't manage to find time for it, and I'm not able to do it when I want to do it, and then I get really frustrated and angry. But ultimately, if you really, really, really wanted to get it done, you would prioritize it, and you would make time for it, and you would be able to do it. That's number one. And number two, if you have some kind of grace towards yourself and you accept your situation as it is, and you accept the limitations and the restrictions that you're working with, then you would not be quite so angry and quite so frustrated when you aren't able to do those things. That's how I feel in general about motherhood and the stories that we tell ourselves when we become mothers and we become parents. You can see some of the responses here from other people. Yes, it gets better. Your child will become more independent, and then you'll get more time to yourself. That's been my experience anyway. My husband and I each make sure that the other gets to do the hobbies that we like apart from the family. That gives us each time alone with the kids, and the other parent gets a break. It never gets back to that pre-baby normal, but the new normal does get more manageable, and you'll have more time for the things that make you feel like you. And so yes, a big part of motherhood is just about adjusting. I really like the concept of transformation, because I think that that's the fundamental idea behind it. Next person says, hey, I did struggle with this after my first, even my second child, but then my heart changed and I realized that I actually now had the opportunity to find myself while simultaneously losing myself. What I mean is I have now realized that there is so much more to life than independence, having a good time, self-fulfillment, etc. Now I have the opportunity to have a real impact on the world with my children. Leave a real impact on the world with my children. I have the opportunity to serve others instead of only myself. Of course, I'm not saying that my identity is only motherhood now. Those other things that you mentioned, like journaling and reading, are still wonderful things to do for yourself. You will have more time later for those things, though. It does get better. I found new ways to enrich my life by learning valuable skills like sewing and canning. I also recently began writing poetry again. And then she says, just in case this is a problem for you too, it took me until my third child to realize that as long as they're in a safe space like their crib, they can cry for 5 minutes while you take a shower. If you have a monitor with a video on, sound off, take a hot therapeutic shower and know that it does get easier. It's a learning curve. You've never done this before, so it will take time to figure it out. And once you think you've got it figured out, they change things up on you. Embrace it. It's happening for your growth as much as theirs. And I really like this concept that you are growing as much as your children are growing through your journey. And this is part of what being a mother means. Thank you so much for listening today. If you disagree with any of my comments about anything, especially prenatals, feel free to leave them down below and I will see you in the next episode.